Welcome to the solution video for the Soda Machine Razor Pages with Auth challenge. Let's go over to our Visual Studio and get set with our new project. So we're going to right click on Soda Machine app. We're going to say add new project. Now this does not associate this project with the other projects directly. Remember, a solution is just a bucket that holds things in the same logical place, but it does not mean that the two know about each other. So when we set this up, just know that we're not associating with our console UI. We will associate with our class library, but that's intentional. Potentially add more to it later or morph it down the road. But in this case, I know that I want to keep it separate and clean. So if we do have a Blazor project, it will be a separate user interface project, not the same one. So I call it Razor UI. And hit create. And here I have .NET Core, ASP.NET Core 3.1 web application, which is the Razor Pages content by default. I'm going to choose to change the authentication to be individual user accounts and store user accounts in app as opposed to in the cloud. All right, that doesn't mean you can't store them in the cloud later, which we will do. It's just that this by default sets them up locally first. Okay, and we do want to have HTTPS. Notice it's grayed out now because we have authentication. When you have authentication, it says, no, you really have to have HTTPS. The reality is you should always have HTTPS. It doesn't matter what the site is for anymore. Google will actually downgrade your website if you don't have HTTPS. So make sure you have that. And then we're not going to enable Docker support with this project. So we'll ignore that. We could add it later if we wanted to, but we're going to leave it alone. And we'll hit create. All right, so with this being all set up, let's set this as the startup project. And let's look real quick at the pages. We have an index page, which is a pretty standard, hey, welcome page. And then the page model behind it is just a simple page model on Git that's empty. Okay, so this is our standard backing page. Let's go ahead and add our reference. So right click on dependencies and add a reference to our Soda Machine library. Hit OK. That adds a reference to the library. Now this is a startup project, so let's run this. I prefer to do the Kestrel version versus the IS Express. It's up to you which you want to do. Either works just fine. So the difference really as far as what you will see is the Kestrel version will give you that command prompt type window, this window right here, that's going to launch. And what that will do is it'll show you what's going on with your website, and then we have your actual web app will launch. All right, a IIS Express will do the same thing, only you won't see this command prompt type window, and your port will be different. Notice the port is 5001 for our HTTPS port. That's always going to be the case with Kestrel. With IIS Express, it will have a different port almost every time. Not every time you run the application, but for every application you build. And the reason why is because you can have multiple of those applications running at the same time on IIS Express, where with Kestrel, it's just your one application running. So there's pluses and minuses to both ways of doing things, but just note that that's what I'm doing here. Okay? So with this, we want to make sure you register. Now this is going to fail, but I want to register locally to show you how it's done. So Tim, I am Tim Corey. My super secret password. And you hit register. And it's going to throw an error for us. And project. Okay? So that makes a little more sense as to what it is. So just note that in the app settings.json, that needs to be changed if you want to actually recognize your database name. If it's too late, you already built your database, no problem. You can just look at the connection string and see what that connection string says the name is and go over into SQL Server Object Explorer and find it. Also, I'm going to go to the Package Manager console, and this says the default project is Submachine Library. I'm going to change that to my Razor Pages UI. I'm going to say update database. And what that will do is it'll build the project, and then it will deploy my database so that now I have that Submachine auth database. Once that's done, then I can go back to and run this project again, and it won't prompt me when I try and register. Okay, so now we and feature. So these are feature updates, which are tiny little updates that should not affect your app, your project working correctly. So it should not be an issue. So I'm going to update those now while the project is new. Because once you've got a project in and running, it gets a little scarier to start making changes to it where you might impact production users. All right, so let's go to changes. There's a lot of changes right now. The good thing is we can just right click on the very top and say stage and say, yes, I want to save this. And let's just review before we go any further. Let's review and make sure there's no files in here that we don't think should be here. So there's the migration files. That's for Entity Framework. Those have to go. There's all of our pages and our properties, our CSS and JavaScript. And the same thing for all our Bootstrap and jQuery and jQuery and jQuery. Yes, we're still using jQuery in 2020. And that's a good thing. I mean, it does provide some nice features. Now, just don't go crazy and abuse it. Okay? So there's nothing in here. There's no DLLs. There's no temporary files we should be worried about. So we can go ahead and commit and say add Razor Pages UI project. There we go. And now we're going to hit commit staged. And we'll go over to our sync. And we'll go ahead and hit push. Now, since we have continuous integration set up, that will trigger a build. And so we're going to make sure the code builds and then it succeeds. We will have to change our continuous integration build because now we have another project. And so we'll have to build that a little differently. So actually build it twice probably. And that's okay. That's part of working with DevOps. It's not a fire and forget. It's not a set up once and never touch. You have to make tweaks to it whenever you make major changes to your system, like adding a whole new user interface. And that's okay. And we'll do that probably in a future video where we start looking at deploying this. Okay, but for now, that covers the primary challenge and the bonus challenge. Pretty simple one this week, but one that hopefully you get comfortable with and know how to do, because that's the foundation for all of your web apps. So knowing how to do this well and do it right is important for setting that foundation well. Okay, thanks for watching. And as always, I am Tim Corey.